Good evening, everybody, and good morning, I say to everybody joining from Sweden. Good afternoon from the other parts of Asia. Very nice to see so many of you joining in this event here today, which is an event organized by the Swedish Australian Chamber of Commerce as a part of the Swedish Chambers in Asia Pacific CEO series. Just a few little housekeeping notes from me. You're welcome to keep your camera on. You can have your microphone on mute, that we would appreciate that. Questions in the chat, please, when we come to the Q&A. And we will be recording this event, so you will also receive a link post the meeting. And now I will introduce Jan Garberg, who is the president of the Swedish Australian Chamber of Commerce here in Sydney.
Thank you, Camilla. It's really fantastic to see such a big online crowd, because we have more than 13 Swedish chambers and their members joining across Asia Pacific and Oceania region, really across multiple time zones. And today's CEO conversation session is also an example of how we continuously are strengthening the collaboration between all the Swedish APAC chambers around some specific key topics. I would like to start to say that climate change and degradation of biodiversity, resource and raw material crisis is truly a living reality across the planet. And by 2030, the global population is expected to reach nearly 8.5 billion people, with nearly 500 million moving into the middle class. This means that more and more people will have a chance for a better life, but in a world that already uses resources requiring more than one planet, these billions of new consumers put an even greater pressure on the planet. At the same time, digitalization, innovation, and new technology is changing how industries operate and drive new consumption behaviors. All of this means facing challenges we have never experienced before, as well as presenting many new opportunities to transform our economies, businesses, and consumption into becoming circular and sustainable. And Sweden as a country by population size and GDP is actually very small, but from an innovation perspective, a constant global top performer, and Swedish global companies are known for fully incorporating their sustainability and circular strategies into their strategic decision framework, and being on the forefront and driving change towards a more sustainable and circular business. So today we get the chance to learn and understand more of this work from one of those companies, namely IKEA. And our guest today has a career with IKEA that spans over 20 years and is also very familiar with Asia Pacific region after living and working there for a long period. He has held roles such as purchase manager in Pakistan, purchase manager for Southeast Asia while living in Hong Kong, assistant to Ingvar Kamprad, Managing Director at IKEA of Sweden Range and Supply, and he stepped into his current CEO and CSO role in September 2017. He's also the chair of World Economic Forum Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders. So it's really with great pleasure I welcome both a friend and an IKEA colleague, Jesper Brodin, CEO, CSO, Ingka Group IKEA. Welcome, Jesper, and very much good morning to you.
Hey, good morning. Great to see you, Jan, and everybody.
Yeah, so it's fantastic to have you here, and I know that you're in a completely different time zone than the full audience, and we are really grateful that we can spend this time together with so many Swedish Asia Pacific Chamber members. And the setup for today's session is a conversation and dialogue. And before kicking off, I also would like to welcome today's moderator and facilitator. She has a long career in the finance technology industry with focus on payments, and she is the CEO and co-founder of EPA Asia, Emerging Payment Associations Asia. She's also initiated and established the setup of Meet Her She Knows, a business initiative with the purpose to close the gender gap in thought leadership in the payment industry. She is also one of board directors at Swedish Australian Chamber. So warmly welcome also to you, Camilla Ballock. And with that, I would like to just hand over both to you, Camilla, and Jesper.
Thank you so much, Jan, and thank you to the Swedish Australian Chamber for letting me do this today. A true honor, and my parents were mighty impressed when I said I was going to have a chat with the CEO of IKEA. I think as a Swede, we have IKEA in our fabric, but even more so as being a Swede abroad. Whenever we say that we're Swedish, we get this, you've from the country of ABBA and IKEA. So more than 20 years with IKEA and 5 years in this assignment as the CEO of the Ingka Group. And I can imagine it's been very special 5 years because you lived through 5 once-in-a-lifetime crises with the pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, supply chain shortages, as Jan spoke about, the accelerated climate crisis and crisis of the cost of living and inflation. So we'll dive into all of those a little bit more through this session, but I like starting those fireside chat. It's cozy. I hope you have your coffee and your bulle there with a personal question. So we're thinking, what can I ask that not everybody knows? And I did my research this weekend, so I know so much more about you and IKEA now than I did a week ago. But I heard that you're a keen guitar player and you turned to the guitar instead of meditation and yoga. So what was the song that was most played during those 5 last year?
So it must have been ABBA, Dancing Queen. No, that was a popular answer. I think, well, you know, I do enjoy music, all sorts of music. And I probably, if you look on the top of my list, it would be a variety from heavy metal to opera. But I think probably opera, actually, because I use it a lot when I travel and such. So maybe Cecilia Bartoli or something like that would be on the top of the list.
I even have to look that one up, so I don't know that. But thank you very much for that. And already now, everybody on the call knows something more than when they join, and we will learn so much more about you and IKEA and the Ingka Group strategy through the call. So everybody on the call, we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So why don't you also say hello to Jesper, pop into the chat where you are, so he knows who's on the call. And let's dive into this, actually, like the bigger questions. So those 5 crises I just referred to, how would you say that they have shaped IKEA over the last 5 years? How is the company different from 5 years ago due to that, what you've gone through?
Wow. So I think it's a great question, Camilla. It's the job description didn't contain these 5 crises when I signed up for this job. So it's interesting to see what it does to all of us, I think, to end up in such a peak crisis situation. But maybe if I would add one, at least challenge that was in the awareness when I signed up to this assignment in IKEA was that you could call it digital disruption or disruption of retail industry was something that was incredibly important for us. IKEA, I think, since so many decades have been so successful, and you know, sometimes your success can be a little bit of your enemy, and we were late into progress when it comes to omni-channel and online and digital development in IKEA. I think it came honestly from being a little bit maybe reluctant to change because of all our successes. So that was maybe one of the first shake-ups that we had to do with ourselves, to say our customers are telling us they want more from us, and our competitors and the new competition is basically shaping the landscape in a way that we were used to do. So I think as I stepped into this new job assignment, that was the menu to look into how can we actually lead change. And then on top of that, of course, as you said, the pandemic and all the 5 big challenges and crises, as you referred to, I do believe one thing that has happened to me and to us is that we had to rely on a good compass, because there were so many situations where basically none of our advisors, none of the leaders from previous generations had answers. There was no history book to provide us with solutions basically in those situations. So we had to rely a lot on basically strong community, strong culture, our values, and try to guide ourselves through that. The second thing I can think of is, except for, of course, all the agony and all the human suffering in so many of these crises, I do believe it's true that crisis makes you stronger. In our case, I think we have probably gone double speed on our own transformation because we had to. We had to basically to survive, make sure that we, instead of a 3-year plan, we had to have a 6 weeks plan to transform into omnichannel and online and so forth. So I think it made us both humble and I think more curious to explore the future, and definitely better on taking action when you really need to.
Oh, fantastic, because it really looked from the outside that it was an amazing shift. It was to e-commerce overnight, more or less, and I don't actually think you lost a lot on your result that year either. But I also have heard you speaking about the inflation crisis, or the climate crisis is driving this around sustainability. And one concept that I've been really interested in is this shifting the paradigm, how you do business. That it was more inputs before with human capital, while now there is different elasticity in those prices. So can you elaborate a little bit on that concept?
Well, you know, I think Jan said it also in the beginning here. These are incredibly challenging, but also interesting times, because the climate crisis is not one of those crises that comes and goes. Economic crisis, energy crisis, and so forth, I think we will experience, but also that will pass eventually. When it comes to climate crisis, it will not pass. As a matter of fact, it is probably, or it is with all the evidence, the biggest threat from an existentialistic point of view for humanity. But what it holds a couple of incredibly important and interesting opportunities, I think, for humankind. And when you look at it, the polarization that has been going on, I think, before we came to awareness about, so to say, should we stop consuming? Should we? There is a thought loop in this that I think has been a little bit guiding us in the wrong direction. And what I mean with that is, as Jan was saying in the beginning also, we are going to be more people on this planet. And there is a planetary limit that we have superseded in the economic model and the consumption model of the world. And now it hits back on us. And the interesting thing that people tend to miss, this is not only a moral and ethic a question. This is not a brand related question only, but it's at the heart an economic question. So if you don't, as an economy, as a country, as a company, if you don't transform into a sustainable operating model, at least one thing will happen. You're going to be incredibly expensive in this new world with limited resources. So therefore, I think the transformation into a sustainable world, a sustainable economy, is both promising for, of course, for humankind, but it's also promising for the economy, because that's where you will reap the benefits of the new low cost. And thirdly, I think it's an awakening for humankind, because it means that we have to listen to Mother Nature and make sure that we adapt to the limitations rather than pretending that we don't have an impact. So that in itself is a fascinating, sometimes scary, but also a fascinating task for humanity.
Yeah, well, absolutely right. And I think one thing that really opened my eyes to this concept when I was going through different case studies and what you've been doing is this about the mattresses in Netherlands. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And I've told several people about this story and comparing it to the only similar thing that I was thinking before this was like different ways of refining oils. So when the oil price is high enough, you can take the oil out of the sand. But I don't think everybody has heard what you're doing with mattresses in Netherlands. So do you want to tell a little bit about that actual case study and how it came about?
No, but I think, thank you. I think it's very interesting. I would say it's a project still in its initial phases, but it tells a story about circularity. Circularity will be not the only one, but one of the great puzzle pieces of how do we resolve this in the future. And the beauty of the mattress story in Netherlands is basically you have, I think it's about 70 million people in Netherlands. Interesting enough, wherever you go in the world, a mattress, whether it comes from IKEA or from somebody else, lasts for 10 years or thereabouts, plus minus. Now, it's bulky, it contains a lot of material, and therefore a mattress has a big CO2 footprint. And then comes an interesting, you can make the thought loop around it. You could say, what would be ways to mitigate the climate footprint of mattresses? And you would say all sorts of myths about stopping consumption is of course naive and it's not going to help us. People will not stop sleeping, so therefore we need mattresses of the future. A second would come, how do you prolong the life length of a mattress, which is a great question, and quality in all its essence is one of the drivers of how do we achieve our climate targets. But it will never be enough. If you prolong the life length of a mattress for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, it will still mean that you have a mountain of new mattresses that needs to be produced, and you have a mountain of mattresses to be taken care of. So 17 million people in Netherlands only, 1.7 million mattresses goes to waste every year, 1.7 million mattresses. And that is a worldwide equation, you can say. So together with some really great entrepreneurs, we set up, we did two things. We set up reverse production, basically taking back mattresses and bringing them back into a reverse production center. This was done in collaboration with the Dutch government, who then removed subsidies of incineration. That's all it took, including also instigating legislation that mattresses had to be returned to collection points. So what it basically does is that we are now up and running with 4 centers, taking back not only IKEA's market share, but actually every mattress in Netherlands. We have a capacity of 1.5, going for 1.7. So that means we will be capable very soon to take back every mattress in Netherlands, break it down into raw material, and put it back into the value chain. And at this moment, you could say, is this built on subsidies or charity? It's not. So the business case is not the best maybe we have ever seen, but it is a positive one, meaning that we do make profit. And as such, we are now scaling it out to UK, Scandinavia, Belgium, I think we are up and running. And with the intention to bring it to all the markets where IKEA exists, where we have an opportunity. So again, it shows a great, I think, example on how do you engineer circularity, how do you reduce your carbon footprint, and at the same time, how do you actually make that a good business case?
I think it's fantastic. Audience, if you agree with me, just hit those applaud, the emoji, because it's really inspired me in my thinking and thinking, what can different companies do? I mean, I love the word harmonization and optimization, and I think that is going in that direction. But a big ingredient in there is actually policy by a government, which policy and advocacy is what I do day in and day out. So what would you like to see on a global arena around policy change for sustainability?
So you can say that there is a lot of things ongoing now, which is very interesting. We have, of course, all followed in the US the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically a subsidy package and an incitament to invest in renewables and into green. You have in Europe, you have the Green Deal, but also recently opening up for basically incentivizing investments in that direction. So I would say, first of all, I would actually applaud governments, also in China and many other markets. We have seen and we will see continuous interest in investing in renewable. Now, this has been, I think, a speed that we haven't seen in a long time, because of course legislation has to move with a certain speed and cautiousness. But we have seen, and we would applaud a lot of the changes that have come. What we need to see even more now is because the clock is ticking. So you can say we don't have 10 years to reflect and test and try. We need to act within years and months in order to move the barriers of the future. And what I know for a fact, as Jan alluded to, the WEF, World Economic Forum Climate Alliance, where we are now 126 companies, I think, representing a carbon footprint globally that would be the 3rd biggest country in the world if it was a country. So it's a big group of companies. These companies are all in the front of climate change and leading in their industry, so to say, and are ready to go. And that means we need to have a much more direct dialogue with legislators, with policymakers, in order to make sure we shift subsidies from the old economy into the new. and that we take synchronized decisions. And I would say probably the area of circularity is the next big thing to crack. I think energy, we're onto it in most places. There are more things to be done, but I would say circularity and speeding up the process of creating circular material flows in society can never happen with governments alone or companies alone. It needs both parties to agree on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important that the private sector, official sector. What do you see in our region around this, with the private sector collaborating with official sector, G20 being in Indonesia this year? What do you hear from our region in this space?
It's a big region to start with. I think it has all the facets and all the multitudes of this world. Having the pleasure myself to live in Indonesia, in Pakistan, in China, I think I can see similarities. And I would say, to start with, it is a myth that Asia would be second out in this topic. I've seen, for instance, in China while working there, policies being enforced. I was among the first in the world, basically, to take the right type of action. Now, I think the benefit in Asia is, as always, isn't it, the capability to act with speed and also to be brave in transformations. So I do believe that Asia Pacific and the markets that are represented today on this call has an opportunity to leapfrog. Meaning that it doesn't make sense to invest in a short-term perspective or with big review mirrors. You have to make your investments with a foresight of what's going to come in 5, 10, 15 years. And I, for instance, wouldn't spend a dime on the old economy or the carbon dependent economy. I think economically it would be a too big risk to take. When you have such great alternatives already now, you see it in the energy. We're over basically the turning point when it comes to renewable energy, but we're getting there in more and more areas. So whoever wants to be the leader of the new economy needs to weigh in not sustainability as a must or as a moral obligation only, but as a business opportunity.
Yeah, it's that being the leader and shaping people's thinking is very interesting. So let's stay on that topic a little bit. And how do you think IKEA has become one of the leaders in this topic? Where did it start?
It's an interesting question. I think probably as we are turning the page here this year to become 80 years, it was 80 years since a 16-year-old entrepreneur called Ingvar registered his company. And, you know, among many interesting things in the story of Ingvar is the culture of Småland, southern part of Sweden, which, by the way, is a culture that has similarities in so many places of the world. But from the beginning, I think the business model was based on being thrifty and resource smart. The driver for that being to be cost smart, and thereby being able to scale your business, basically. That was the thought from Ingvar and the success of the IKEA of the 1900s, among other things. So I think in the genes of IKEA, there is something around being smart about resources. And now, you know, I would like to speak with loudness to the point that resource smart equals climate smart equals cost smart. This is not a contradiction. And I think it is a myth right now that many people think that sustainability will come at a premium. The problem with that thought is, if sustainability has to come with a premium, it means only the few rich would be able to afford it. And so we will fail anyhow. So the task for me, for Jan, and for everybody in IKEA in this call, and for everybody leading an operation is basically to make sure that we find the economic benefits of sustainability and do that fast. And then I would say, obviously, some things are low-hanging. There are opportunities that you can ripe in any Scope 3 value chain that will be smart from both cost and climate. And then you come to certain points where you need to make decisions. As you said, make investment decisions and make some calculated risks. And possibly what you said before also, then you come to certain real barriers where you need to have dialogue and collaboration with policymakers in order to overcome those barriers. So that the things that doesn't look economically attractive today get support and that we gain the time aspect here.
Yeah, I get so many questions whatever thought leadership we're creating. Everybody wants to talk about return on investment. That's the first question. Oh, talk about return on investment, Camilla. And I think money talks and attracts. So on all this research I did, so I listened to several interviews, as you can see now. I'm not really good at quoting, so this is what I heard you say, so I might be wrong. But it was something like, you rather the work with the yay sayers and the believers rather than the no crowd, and that IKEA will have a more strategy around communication on this topic. So can you say a little bit, what can we expect to see around this, and what are the ripple effects, and maybe also what can the people and the business leaders on this call do to echo that and do more with the voice?
No, but I think for my advice would be to start with, I think anybody leading a business today, there is no, maybe there has never been a continuum or a constant, it's an illusion. So everything changes. But it's true that the rate of change today and the variables of change are much greater. And as you started this call also, in the light of the last year's crisis, so many things have happened that nobody had a clue about. So in a way, I think in accepting change as an opportunity, I think is the starting point. Then I think what I've seen, which is truly important for any of us business leaders, is to educate ourselves a little bit. So a few years ago, when I started this journey, I had most blanks, to be honest, in the science of climate and the economics of climate. What I see today is fellow CEOs in big companies that we have basically gone through a bit of education. We know our business, we know a little bit about economics, a little bit about leadership. But in order to be a leader today, you need to understand climate science and climate logic, if you like. And in that climate logic, what you refer to is what's called a scope 3 approach, which mainly means that you not only look at the energy and the carbon footprint in your own premises, but you extend to your impact on the value chain. And I would say my advice to anyone is to make an assessment of your carbon footprint in scope 3, because that will guide you obviously to where you can have an impact. So you can do a lot of symbolic things, and symbolic actions could have a benefit because it can inspire people, but you better know where your big footprint sits, because you will be required in legislation in country after country to not only report on it, but to perform. And here comes the interesting thing. When you find your big buckets of carbon footprint, however, so to say, extended that responsibility is in your value chain up or downstream, that's where the economic benefits will sit in the future as well, through collaboration or maybe enforcing policies. So I would say it is incredibly important to get your understanding, and here 80% right is better than 100% wrong, or not having any answers whatsoever. So that, I think, is the starting point for anyone.
Yeah, I think it's also that ripple effect. You do something, inspire somebody else. It's really hard to see where it starts and stops, and as long every move in the right direction takes us on the journey. We have a question here, actually, Veronica, and she's asking, do you think it's easier to implement those strategies because we're a private company?
Yes.
Perfect.
I think so. I would say so. We are a foundation-based organization, a private-based foundation. So the nature of us is that we are long-term, and I would say also being basically the group is owned by a foundation, which only purpose is to work with philanthropy regarding people and planet. So of course, it's easier for me in the perspective not to have to operate on a multitude of diverse opinions, maybe, that I can imagine you would have to do being on the stock market, for instance. So I have definitely respect for that. But I also think we shouldn't make that an excuse in a way, because always in the leadership of big companies, the will of the money, even if it's a stock share owner, so to say, is of course to see the company thrive. And today, if you have a company and a brand, to be on the right side of climate and sustainability is to be investing in your brand. The opposite would be to basically put your brand at a great risk, not only for your customers, but also for attracting people. We see an incredible spike of interest in the world. And again, you don't want to be the last one on the platform here when everybody else is on the train. Secondly, if you look at it, the companies that are on the train here and working with governments, policymakers, or everybody, there is a new form, I think, of networking and being, so to say, collaborating on the right side of history. And again, to not engage in that, I think would be to put your company at the risk. So shareholders, whoever they are, needs to watch out to protect their investments as well from that reason.
Yeah, I think also we see more communication around this ESG scoring about listed companies and the correlation with profit and hitting targets. Shifting in and looking a little bit at what the Ingka investment has done. So 2021, you took a managing share in Akano Bank with the ambition to offer competitive and accessible financial services, enabling even more people to have better homes and thereby live better lives. And after that, you also invested in a white label buy now, pay later player, Yiffity. And a couple of weeks ago in Direct ID, which is a global open banking solution with a potential to complement and disrupt the traditional credit and risk market and help drive financial inclusion for more people. All those are very interesting topics for myself and I think for our region, because we are the most underbanked region in the world, with 70% of the 1.8 billion people that doesn't have access to bank account, and even more so people that doesn't have the extra services, never touched credit or things like that. Is this an opportunity that we can expect to see IKEA take a lead in?
Well, I think take a lead is a strong word. I think the approach for us is quite simple. Supporting the many people means that we support people within wallets all across the world. That's our customer base. And you know, the basic idea of IKEA is to help people to a better life at home, and to make that, to prove that it's possible to be affordable and at the same time provide quality design and so forth. And of course, sustainability in the way that's built into the formula. Now, one of the challenges has been then for people is, in particular, I would say, when it comes to the things in home that requires a bit of an investment, like a kitchen, for instance. And there are so many people out there who simply don't have the savings enough to be able to fulfill their dream. And thereby, we have seen it since quite long in IKEA as one of the obligations for us to support people with reasonable financing for that part in life at home. We do that, and we'll continue to do that with third parties in many places. And then the Akano Bank is just one of the opportunities for us to ourselves learn about the instrument and find the balance between, of course, providing financing, but at the same time exercise that with caution and with a value base, caring for our customers. So you will probably see us expand in that area, but it would be geared really on our core business, which is about life at home.
Yep. No, I understand that. It's just interesting how those instruments all sit in financial inclusion, and also the open banking has a big role in carbon tagging of product, both in suppliers, downstream and upstream. So I think it's brilliant investments with lots to come, especially in our region. I've been talking a lot about what I read and so on. What are you most proud of in this space, and why?
In which space? Means sustainability
and sustainability and circular economy, or in general, what you have managed over the last 5 years?
Well, you know, I think it's a very good question. I think one way to answer would be with the recent facts that we have, which makes me incredibly proud. So we have recently reported that we, since Paris Agreement 2016, which is a baseline year, we in IKEA have grown by approximately or north of 24%. So we have grown and expanded the business. And at the same time, we have decoupled carbon. So we are minus 13.6 in carbon. This makes me incredibly proud. This is absolute, by the way, not relative, it's absolute. So there you go. It's at least one proof point that a big brand, a network, can thrive business-wise, and at the same time decouple carbon with quite high speed. Our science-based target in a goal for 2030 is -15, and we are at -13.6 already. At the same time, having that said, what is the trick, I think, and the challenge with this area is that it continues to be a bit of a moving target. So every year that goes by, we discover opportunities, but we also discover the connection to nature, the connection to what really needs to be delivered, which means that we are currently undergoing a revision of all our plans and goals in order to strengthen them even further, which will be required. So I think proud of the achievements we have started to present, respect for the challenges in the future, but maybe then even more proud about that we as a community have accepted, I would almost say for once, to engage in a topic where we don't have all the answers. And I think because typically companies, and I'm sure people on the call would agree with me, you want to have all the answers before you commit to a plan, in particular publicly. This is an area where we simply can't wait until we have all the answers. So we need to aim for something, and we need to be loyal to Paris, and then we have to figure out the answer as we go along. And I would say I am proud that the organization in all parts, our suppliers and partners all over, have taken this to the heart and are delivering to it and proving that it's possible.
So is it different in the different markets? I mean, IKEA is so big, so 30 countries, so many different companies, maintaining the focus, supply chain. How do you get the coherent leadership across the globe?
Very good. Well, I think to start with, this is interesting. This is a global problem. Carbon and climate change is global. So it means that we are forced to collaborate and work together. It is, of course, true that there is an incredible imbalance in the depth from the past, from the countries producing carbon, so to say, versus those who have added or contributed very little to that. So that is part of the past. But going forward, it is a true global problem. So you can't, the boundaries of a country, for instance, is not a way you can isolate the problem. Secondly, it is about shaping the world economy. So that means every market, every country, every company needs to engage in this. And therefore, there will be a coherent solution. And the question is, when are you on it? When are you part of the leadership and so on, which is, of course, deeply rooted into economics and other priorities, not at least in countries where you need to consider the incredible change of living standards and all these sort of priorities. But I would say I'm hopeful because you see signs, not only in, so to say, representatives of governments and the people, but also in companies, that the first topic was, is this a problem? I think most people are past that. And then secondly, what would be the right target and ambition level? And then the world actually came together around the Paris Agreement in 2016, which was phenomenal. And if you look then today, the debate is not so much about if there is a problem and what should be the target. It could happen that we need to discuss and revert to some of that, but it's more about the solutions. And that brings, I think, a lot of hope and excitement that we are on the right track, even if we haven't cracked all the things that we need to crack.
Yeah. So I think it's quite amazing in IKEA. I mean, you even further than McDonald's in delivering the same experience with every shop you go into. You can hardly know which country when you come in and how the layout. But in my industry, we talk a lot about local, that you still need to have local strategies or cultures, or if nothing else, payments methods. How do you speak around our region? I know it's very different, Australia or Indonesia or China and Philippines. So can you share anything where you need a local strategy in APAC? Well,
I think in IKEA, it's one of the principles in the business model is, of course, economy of scale. And, you know, economy of scale, I think is also one of the biggest friends of sustainability, because it's very difficult to, if you want to really change things, to scale it is a good idea if you scale good. Now, when it comes to humankind, whether you're from Japan or China, Australia, Indonesia, and so forth, in all our deep studies over the years with people in people's homes and so on, you can say we find that more than people might think we are the same. So the same basic needs are there. But in the formula of IKEA's democratic design, as we like to talk about it, where we have the form, design, where we like to, you know, not adapt too much, because we think there's great expressions and designs across the world. And what we should try to do is to stick to the things that makes us unique, which is preferably towards the Scandinavian simplicity. But when it comes to quality, it's pretty uni, I would say. When it comes to sustainability, it's also very, there's a commonality into it. So the differentiator, number one, is function. So the, you know, the stiffness or softness of a mattress, the way we cook. So there are basically in life at home, there are certain functions where we differ a lot. And then IKEA already today has adapted a lot to those functions in the different market, which means that we need to have products that look and look slightly different. Then, of course, the big last fifth factor is cost and price, where, of course, the income levels vary so much. And here you can say IKEA, the long-term direction is to basically get started and work our way with scale, with smart people. Very often in the regions where we operate, we also would have people who help us with services, with production and so forth, and to work out ways in order to get closer and closer to the many people and their economic reality.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to read, everybody writing so long questions. It's a bit hard for me to read between the lines here. But I think a lot of questions are around more IKEA as a leader in this space. What do you do to bring the masses with you? Specifically, is a question here from Jesper Brodin. They're talking about that he has worked very hard to find and develop local partners to provide sustainable solutions like EV deliveries, recycling materials, and so on. And what do you do to help other companies to find those solutions? If you have is it a cookie cutting approach that you can actually help other companies to keep the same tempo as you?
I believe so. You can say the starting point would be for us, and it should be for anybody, is what we call then the scope 3 approach, where you look at the different parts of your value chain. If you would take the total IKEA system, would start at raw material, it would be production, there would be transport, retailing, but also downstream usage of products in life at home. When we sell electrical appliances or LED bulbs, etc., it's part of our footprint. And then the final bucket would be afterlife, if you like, the last stage of a product. So that is what we refer to as scope 3. So I think any business needs to approach that and understand both the impact, the size of your footprint, and how you can operate in it. And naturally, people would then say, here is how I can improve myself. Secondly, here is how I can influence the people, my partners, my suppliers, by dictating conditions. But you come to a certain point, everybody does, where you will not be able to dictate, but you need to collaborate. So in the climate transformation, it's incredibly interesting to see that we need to establish new ways of collaborating. And that means that we in IKEA also have since then, that's one of the reasons that I'm participating in the Climate Alliance of World Economic Forum and a couple of other interesting platforms, because we realize that we are simply too small to influence or take decisions on our own. And I can imagine many on the call here sit with the same sentiment, so to say. But I think one of the pitfalls for anyone would be to say, I'm too small, I will not be able to influence. I think we need to join up in different groups, in different constellations, and be part of creating the momentum in order to build for the new. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer time, but I would say, if you look back, you would also say that some things have gone much faster than people would have thought. Look at the, in Europe and in other places, look at the transformation of the mobility industry right now. 5 years ago, electric vehicles was a thought. Then came Tesla, and then now if you don't have a line or a transformation in your company, you're probably at risk. So things can go very quick.
Yeah, Jose, because I guess that's the thing with many countries in this region, even Australia, it's not that many stations where you can charge your cars. So it's all that knock-on effect to be inspired and see what you can do. And I think money talks there. One question more about our region. What are you excited about the APAC region? And what do we have to look forward to from IKEA in rollouts or initiatives?
Well, you know, I think entrepreneurship would be the first thing that springs to mind. So in many of, and I would say in general, in Asia Pacific is one of the most entrepreneurial places on this planet. So, and being an entrepreneur means that you have, you're close to ideation. You're even, which I think is fantastic with Asia Pacific, with all richness of tradition and I think confidence in tradition. There is a parallel stream of curiosity and openness to change and to try new things. So, and then I've seen that so many years of my 7-8 years living in Asia Pacific, the speed of taking decisions and the courage to invest in the new has been a driving factor to the success the last 25 years, right? Sorry. So I think that side of Asia Pacific will be a guarantee for being a leader in the future, not a follower only in this space. And when it comes to Australia also, if you look at it, you know, it's super interesting because you're in a big country with a lot of kilometers and miles to cover, but there's a lot of wind and sun available. So in IKEA, together with John and Ingka Investments, we're super proud that we are now also in Australia making conscious investments into the renewable energy sector, which of course is going to help us not only from a brand perspective, but from an economic outlook. So again, the quicker we can benefit from the new economy and invest in it, the better, I would say.
Yep. Yeah, and one interesting question that comes up here in the audience, and I can add some fact to that actually from another project, that APAC is also the most mobile region. I think 57% of the global's mobility happen within APAC, or it might be even more. And like Hong Kong, 42% are born abroad and moving through their lifetime. So we have a question here about leasing of furniture or rental furniture as a service. Is that something on the mind of IKEA?
Maybe. We have done, since a couple of years, we're actually working with some pilot projects in that. And I would say it created a lot of buzz on the market. There was a lot of interest from the public in it. It was slightly less easy to get it flying than we thought, to be honest. There are certain sectors, I would say the students is one of the sectors where that has become quite successful when we try it. Another one is businesses. So smaller businesses where that concept has become more interesting. But, you know, changes do take time. So this is one of the areas where we will hang in, so to say, and see how do we support people in this space. It could be financing, but it can also be leasing models. So we're going to continue and test and try there if we can have an impact.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those are always married together, almost always, the finance and subscription of services. So with that, I do think we are out of time. So I'm going to keep on chatting to John and see what he has to add to your story. But from us now, Jesper, thank you very, very much for taking the time to chat with us. Everybody in the chat, say thank you to Jesper. And
thank you, Camilla. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jesper, for sharing so openly about, not only leadership in IKEA's operation, but also what IKEA is doing right now to contribute towards a truly better planet for the many people. As always, very inspirational, and you have been adding a lot of positive energy, especially towards a topic like the climate crisis, and showing that doomsday rhetoric and continuous problem focus is not the way forward, but there are so many possibilities and opportunities, and here and now, where we can act now and to both grow business and transform into a circular and sustainable business model. So And this, of course, as you have shared, the only way forward is together, joining forces with like-minded companies and forming new partnerships, and ultimately, of course, inspiring and helping all of us to live a more circular and sustainable life. I know that you are right now broadcasting from the Helsingborg store, and soon the doors are going to open and you will be there to greet some amazing customers. So we will let you go. And I hope also that I just want to say that everybody that have been listening and participating today, I think we have had a record number attendance, got truly inspired and want to sign up to be a part of driving a positive change for a better future. I also would like to close and just say, Camilla, thank you very much for facilitating a really great conversation with Jesper. So
Could
with
you
that,
continue? This was so much fun.
yeah, maybe we need to do a season 2 and episode 1 later on. So to both of you, thank you very much. And I think, Camilla, anything to add from your side before we close this?
No, just thank you so much, Jesper, for joining us, and also thank you to Camilla for a brilliant fireside chat here. We have a lot of questions in the chat, but maybe we'll forward them to you, Jesper, and Daniela to help us answer those. We're running out of time, but thank you so much, and we look forward to take 2.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, for the opportunity. I need to run down and open the doors now. So see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you also, everybody, for joining for this online event. We do keep an eye out for our future online events. The next one, which is also a CEO series event, is hosted by the Swedish Chamber in China, and it's going to be the 10th of May. And it's with Göran Björkman, President and CEO of Aleima. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but keep an eye out for that. It will be promoted out through all the chambers in Asia Pacific. So thank you.